Helicopters Magazine, your source for Canadian industry news and business intelligence for more than 30 years.
Proposed changes to flight and duty times is another considerable challenge Canadian operators will face going forward. We asked our esteemed panel how these changes could affect their operations and what they plan to do about it.
There was a working group that was struck by Transport Canada through the KRAC process to examine the existing flight and duty time prescriptive rules and also to examine the prospect of implementing fatigue risk management systems in Canada, either as a regulatory requirement or in some other way. The theory was that the working group would use as the foundation for its discussions the latest in the fatigue-related science. And Transport Canada, to their credit, hired a fatigue specialist who is under contract to the group to answer questions so that we can ensure if we're going to make some changes to the rules, they're based on science rather than science fiction. And also less on sort of anecdotal experience from the working group members, although we're all expected to bring operational experience to bear on the discussions as well. We've been meeting about 3 days a month across the country in plenary for the last 7 months on this subject. So we've been investing a considerable amount of time and effort, not only from the association directly, and I've been participating, but a couple of our operator members have also been participating as well as technical advisors to the association. The problem is, in my own view, is that the theory is that the group is to be talking in plenary about those human elements that cut across all industry segments. And to give you one of the most obvious examples, is 8 hours rest is a basic requirement for a human to have, to function properly on a regular basis. And I think there's broad agreement on the working group that that requirement should apply across all subparts, from small helicopter operations to airline operations. It gets a very complicated issue, and it gets complicated quickly when you talk about circadian rhythms and early starts, and interrupting a pilot's sleep and split duty and all those sort of things. So it's a very complex issue. There's no doubt about that. My concern is that the discussion has focused largely on the interests of the large carriers in the process, and we've strayed to some extent from the hard science that's available to us through the research and through our contracted scientist on the project. One of the associated problems is that we're concerned that the solutions that are falling out of the discussion in plenary and with the large carriers are going to be driven into the air taxi world, particularly on issues that are unsupported by science or agreed upon between the airlines and their unions that are really irrelevant to our sort of operations. The short answer is that we believe that there are different ways to skin the same cat on this issue. There are the issue that you made reference to of dealing with cumulative duty hours, which is a new concept in the aviation industry in Canada. We believe that duty hours are less important in our industry than time on task or flight hours as a measure of the fatigue for flight crews. So we believe that you cannot stay up for extended periods of time, and you certainly can't encroach on the 8 hours rest, but the duty days which involve low flying but a longer duty day in our industry are less fatiguing than duty days that involve high flying time. So flying time is a more accurate measure for us of fatigue than duty time. And it could really cripple the helicopter industry when we depend so heavily on remote operations where it's difficult to make crew changes, seasonal operations where we make hay when the sun shines during a 4-month season during the summer, particularly in the north where there are extended daylight hours. It's just ours is a world that is so unlike airline scheduled operations that it's difficult to talk about some of the more detailed issues in the same room with them because our world is just so different.
From an industry perspective, I don't think we see any need to adjust in either direction the limitations on flight duty time. And surely the concept of applying a cumulative constraint on it is really forbidding. I'm very, very afraid of that. It'll render the kind of operations that those of us who have to go to the field for long periods of time will be unable to operate economically. And of course, what that's going to mean to the marketplace is the pressure will come from that end, and all sorts of negative results can derive from that. Depression on the rates, lesser monies expended by operators for safety, all of the negative downsides.
Okay. Our VP Ops has been very engaged with Fred. You know, it's a big concern for us. We're a big operator.
Yeah.
You know, I think the last briefing he gave me, he spoke in terms of the system that is currently structured is not going to be the same.
Right.
There's going to be some change. That's inevitable. So how it is today is it will not be how it's going to be. But there's an awful lot of you know, bona fide concern about using a negotiated union airline solution to the practical application for the helicopter world. And I mean, I think every operator could hang their hat or accept limitations provided they were based on data or based on science, not based on opinion or based on a negotiated solution between the airlines and unions. And I think, you know, as this progresses, I mean, it's still going to be a couple of years before this goes through the whole process. Yeah. But as this progresses, I think if the industry and if the association remains clear on, you know, change is not necessarily bad, provided the change is supported by fact, then we can probably live with something different than what it is today. But certainly not some of the numbers that were thrown around at the committees yesterday. They would cripple. They'd cripple small operators. They'll cripple big operators. They would fundamentally cripple the industry. And at the end of the day, transport has no interest in crippling the helicopter industry. So personally, I'm hopeful that there'll be pragmatic solutions because the hue and cry would be from coast to coast, and it'll be a political hue and cry. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I think personally, from a safety perspective, it's great to revisit this stuff. And if there's better science available and better data available, so that we can make better decisions, I think that we should embrace that concept, but be ever vigilant with how it evolves. And I mean, there's far too many rules in the regs that were written by fixed-wing pilots who don't understand the helicopter industry, and maybe the push should be from the industry. We are different, you know. Our industry traditionally flies between 550 and 700,000 revenue hours a year. And that's a pretty high. That's a big number. That's a big number. That's a lot of money. There's a lot of jobs tied up in this industry, and there's so. We shouldn't ever be treated like poor cousins.
We are supporting the resource economy of Canada. Absolutely. And more, if you read the economic analysis of the future for Canada, that's what our future is going to be based on.
Absolutely.
It always has been, but manufacturing and other industries are going to be comparatively less important in the future. And we can't support industry if we're not being supported.
No, exactly.